I'm not happy, CrowdStrike. Not happy. If you weren't paying attention to the news, there was recently a massive IT outage that affected millions of people around the world, and I just so happened to be one of them. You see, for months I had been planning to reunite with my long-distance boyfriend, who lives on the exact opposite side of the country. We had plans to go to a cat cafe, been smiling friends together, and just enjoy being in each other's company. But the big event was to attend this year's MGS Con at the Hilton Long Beach Hotel, which I was super excited about. And at first, I thought that it'd go out without a hitch. I got to the airport at almost 4 in the morning and, after having to pay for my suitcase, was sent through TSA. They then identified my crotch as a threat and gave me a thorough pat-down. I was like, okay, I just got violated for no reason at 4 in the morning, but that's the worst that will happen to me today. So I laugh it off and walk further down the airport when I see a monitor displaying the blue screen of death when it normally be literally anything else. I see it, I laugh, and I move on because my flight boards at 6. And then 6 comes and goes. Then 7, then 8, then 9. The people around me at the terminal exchanged conversations about a Microsoft outage and that tons of flights were getting delayed or cancelled. So naturally, I'm growing anxious. I mean, I spent a lot of time and money on this trip, and as someone whose semesterly bill was paid off days prior, you know I was putting in for as many extra shifts as possible at work. As time continued to pass, I was faced with a pretty big dilemma. Either I'd take the risk and keep going, or I'd come home and cry myself to sleep because I'd barely gotten any from how excited I was up until that point. But at my own insistence, I decided to stay. After all, this is 2024. Technology continues to advance with each passing day. Just give it a few hours and then everything will be back to normal. There's just one little catch though. I had 2 layovers scheduled for this flight, one in Minneapolis and the other in Salt Lake City. While I was waiting for my flight to Minneapolis to start boarding, my flight from Salt Lake City to Long Beach had already taken off. But that's fine. We started boarding over 6 hours after we were supposed to, and I figured that I could speak to a Delta agent in Minneapolis or Salt Lake City about my situation, especially since the Salt Lake City flight was also delayed. I fly, I land, and then I find out that the Salt Lake City flight was also canceled. At this point, I'm starting to freak out and rush over to a line to speak to a Delta agent on that floor. Unfortunately for me, so did everyone else. The line was backed all the way to one of the walking escalators inside the airport. I waited for an hour or so before I was close enough to see that there were no Delta agents, but a set of hotlines. Not only that, but the line stagnated for about half an hour. Now at this point, I've been calling my family and my boyfriend, since I've been flying by myself with no clue on what to do. And as I left the line to charge my phone, since I was still on call, I listened in real time as every attempt to find me a new flight or place to stay on the other end failed. To say that I was scared would be an understatement, especially since my suitcase with important medication was taken from me way earlier that day and I had no idea where it was. So I stumbled down a baggage claim and couldn't find it because of course I couldn't, and show an employee my claim number. She tracks my suitcase down and tells me that I'll get a text when it's available to be picked up and that I should wait in line upstairs to meet with an agent in person. And holy shit, it is packed. I ended up standing in line for over 3 hours, which gave me enough time to pick up my suitcase when it was ready and not miss a beat thanks to the nice couple in front of me. By the time I neared the front of the line, there was a news crew filming us for B-roll footage. We got me on another state's newsfeed before GTA 6. I'm thrilled. Finally, I get to an agent who tells me that they, quote, can't change the final destination, and prints out tickets for Salt Lake City and Long Beach that were set to take off the next day. I'm stunned, but I figured that means that everything was back up and running again. Sure, I missed a day and would miss most of the convention, but that's fine! The ultimate goal of the trip was to be with my boyfriend. And now that I have my suitcase and the registered travel plan, I set off to the Traveler's Lounge. Now, when looking at places to stay, I perused Airbnb to see if there was anything available, and a lot of them looked shady. Like, one of my top options was a tiny camper in the woods for 200 something a night. Hell no, man, I'm not about to become a Silent Hill protagonist, as she was already terrifying as is. So I'm forced to opt for a supposedly safer option, the aforementioned lounge. There was a cafe that was still open, thankfully, so I grabbed a croissant for dinner and a slice of coffee cake for breakfast for the next day. It was almost 11 p.m. at this point, and I hadn't eaten anything since 4 a.m., an entire time zone away, so it's wild that I didn't pass out between that and the stress I was in. Not to mention the physical pain I was going through, like sore legs and a throbbing headache. But I ate, changed in the bathroom, and settled myself down on a couch segment to get as much sleep as I could for the day to come. Yeah, I only got 2 hours in. Have you ever slept in an airport or public space in general? If so, tell me your secrets, I am begging you. There was the constant lighting, fluctuating noise from different flights coming and going, and of course the fear of getting my stuff stolen while I was asleep. I also didn't think to pack a blanket because, California. So I was basically a shivering mess as I alternated between reading, a crossword book, and informing my friends and followers alike about what happened. Not only were they aware of the trip since the purchases were finalized, but some went so far as to take me up on commissions to help pay for the trip, which only makes me feel worse about this whole thing. Eventually, I get up and change into my cosplay for the convention, being Huey Emmerich. I was planning for MGS-Con to be my official debut for it, since up until that point it was something I'd occasionally wear for fun and with the wrong goddamn pair of pants. I finished, made my way through TSA, and didn't get my crotch groped this time, so things were already looking up. Sure, the terminal was packed and our flight was delayed, meaning that I'd likely missed 90% of the convention, but that's fine! We can book it from the airport, and rushed over to where the guests were signing autographs, and the flight was cancelled. And to make matters even worse, that second attempt of flying out to Long Beach from Salt Lake City, like last time, had already taken off. I was completely stranded. Again, my life was like the Smiling Friends Brazil episode, except it was significantly less funny and had no one for me to share the experience with. So I and everyone else run downstairs to speak to the agents, and this time I ended up waiting over 4 hours before meeting with one. And then a fight broke out behind me. To clarify, it was verbal and I have absolutely no idea what the context was, but it was enough to involve both Delta employees and airport security, so to say that the atmosphere was tense would be putting it lightly. As that was happening, the agent told me that I was automatically booked on a flight to Vegas for the next day, which would have low-key been terrifying if I actually went through with it. The only things you can do in Vegas are either get robbed by a stranger or robbed by a casino, and I'd already lost a lot of money as is. Thankfully, they switched me to a flight home that was going to depart later that day, and they assured me multiple times that my suitcase, which was set for Vegas, would be with me on that flight. No trip, but at least I'd be home, I guess. So I make my way through TSA again, which is really stupid because literally nothing about what I had on me changed, but whatever. I was finally getting out of the airport. And for the first time in 2 days, I was getting a proper meal. I couldn't try In-N-Out like I wanted to when I'd be in California, but I did get to try Shake Shack and its painfully average food with above average pricing. And while I was eating that, I finally opened my Gmail. See, when I was waiting in line the day prior, my boyfriend had apologized for everything I was going through, even though it wasn't his fault, and wanted to make it up to me. And among a list of other hypotheticals, I mentioned the site Cameo. If I couldn't meet any of the voice actors I wanted to, I may as well go for an alternative to simulate the experience if it'd make me feel something again. That voice actor ended up being the one I wanted to meet the most. Christopher Randolph, the voice of Otacon and Huey.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
I won't play the video on the off chance that he finds this one and decides to smite me because I probably broke a law, but I will say this. It was the first and only time I cried tears of joy during the entire ordeal. So Chris, wherever you are, I hope you get that bag and are thriving right now. Also, imagine losing your will to live at an airport and you turn around to see Huey Emmerich crying with a burger in his mouth. That's really funny, not gonna lie. At the terminal were 3 pending flights. One to Oregon, one to Boston, and then my destination. Oregon got delayed by a few hours, as did mine, and Boston had theirs cancelled entirely. And considering that Boston was the second of the 3 flights in that lobby, I was worried the same thing would happen to me. Eventually, I decided to use the bathroom. Imagine my shock when every single bathroom in the area is closed for cleaning. Like they had a rope up and everything. And then I get a text from Delta saying my plane's arrived, so I hurry back over to the terminal, only to trip and fall hard as soon as I get there from how tired I was. I honestly ended up watching queso compilations while the Oregon people came and went. I did try sleeping on the floor since all the seats were taken, but that obviously didn't work. After an hour of waiting, we finally boarded and were home free. The flight attendants were pricks, but hey, I wouldn't have to deal with them anymore either. Plus, I got to pee in the first class bathroom because of them being pricks, so that worked out, I guess. Finally, we land, and I make a mad dash for the baggage claim. The belt starts up, the bags start coming, and then they start looping, and then the belt stops. Yeah, it turns out my suitcase was, at that time, on its way to California. And considering that I had my meds in it, that I couldn't take the previous night because they were in there, I was not okay. Instead of screaming and crying on the way home like I thought I would, I just sat feeling like a husk. A shell. All of the energy and hope that I had was gone. Everything that I worked hard to get had crumbled around me. And worst of all, I never got to see the person I love most. But the story doesn't end there, because of course it doesn't. And I'm not just talking about the suitcase, which, as a side note, thankfully arrived the next day with everything intact. I'm talking about everything I lost. During my time at the airport, I had been in constant contact with the host of the Airbnb I was supposed to stay at while in California, as well as the social media manager of MGSCon, since the staff weren't responding to my emails. I mean, they had virtual passes. I figured I'd show them proof of purchase for the physical ones in exchange for some, but of course that didn't work out, which is fine. I get it, you know? Small convention, second time operating it, it is what it is. It didn't hinge on me. What did hinge on me somewhat was my Airbnb reservation. Again, I had been in constant and consistent contact with the host, who went from super friendly and understanding to getting annoyed with me like it's my fault that I was going through an international crisis. I filed for a refund while in the airport, which would have been while I would have stayed at the Airbnb, and all he had to do was accept it. Yeah, he didn't accept it. Then I contacted the Airbnb support, which ended up supporting his decision and claimed that I couldn't get a refund because of how and when I did it. I didn't yell at him or insult the guy, and had a legitimate excuse for being unable to show up, which he was aware of. But they continued to deny it, even though, one, this was again an international crisis, which undoubtedly affected more than just this one reservation, so it's a company problem that should be addressed instead of pointing the finger at me. 2, I'm not only new to the app, but I'm mentally disabled, so there's things I struggle to comprehend that may seem basic to others. Number 3, my priorities the day that I first landed in Minneapolis after contacting the host was finding a roof over my head, since the last place that anyone will want to be stranded in, especially when you're disabled and have no way to defend yourself, is a massive city like Minneapolis.
Number 4, bullets in hot dog.
And to make matters worse, not long after I was told by Airbnb that I wouldn't get a refund, AO3 sent me an email saying I had a week to take down or edit out content that mentioned I have a Ko-Fi, a platform that I'm now relying on as a secondary source of income since I lost over $500 on something that was entirely out of my control. So that's where I'm at right now. They continue to refuse me a refund. The insurance that I paid for my ticket might not reimburse me, and I've lost a lot this past week, both financially and mentally. I'm completely at a loss here. I mean, I don't expect any of you guys to have an answer, but I want to get my story out there. Show the people who went through it that they weren't alone. Show these big companies that we're more than just unhappy customers. Show my gratitude for all the people who've listened to and supported me through all this, because I definitely wouldn't be okay otherwise. So thank you to them. Thank you to my amazing boyfriend for being so patient and loving through all of this. Thank you, the viewer, for watching this and listening to me. And thank you, Transportation Secretary, however you pronounce your name, for telling everyone that no one should be stranded at an airport overnight or stuck on hold for hours waiting to talk to a customer service agent.
Oh wow! No shit!